Welcome to the podcast Life as a show intently focused on exploring and unearthing the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. We all roughly know the story of the entrepreneur who persevered, sacrificed, and ultimately made it to the top. Heck, we even know the story relating to athletes in most major pro sports. However, do we know anything about the story of the individual who rocketed to the top in an extreme sport like skydiving or wind tunnel flying? I'm thinking no. After listening to today's show, that problem will be rectified. You will hear about one person's fascinating rise to the top to where he is now a world-renowned athlete reaching the upper echelons of what his mind-bending sport has to offer. Troy Rodway is a Belgium-based Canadian skydiver and wind tunnel flyer extraordinaire. With over 3,000 plus jumps and over 1,500 hours logged in specially designed wind tunnels which simulate the skydiving experience, Troy is a seasoned flyer. He has been on sponsored jumps and has joined competitions all over the world in countries like, get ready for this, the US, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Australia, Norway, Sweden, Russia, Japan. Not done yet. Hold on. There's more. Austria, Germany, Hungary, Slovenia, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Switzerland, almost there, Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg, England, and Tunisia. And this list is continually growing. However, his rise to the top is almost as intriguing as his current lifestyle. In his early days, Troy took extreme measures to float his dreams of flying by taking bank loans to purchase gear and by working as a janitor for a wind tunnel company to increase his own training opportunities. Oh, and did I mention he learned a new language in order to further his chances to fly? Well, add that to the list too. Now, aside from the events and competitions, Troy is a wind tunnel instructor and has worked in places like Montreal, Toronto, and where he's currently based in Belgium. His rapid evolution in combining skill and talent led him to global world championship competitions, where he has consistently landed in the top 10 with a personal best of 5th. Finally, Troy founded his own annual world-class skydiving event in his home country of Canada, which attracts some of the very best flyers from around the world. In quoting another flyer in the sport, Troy is a beast. You'll have a hard time finding someone faster than him, both in the sky and in the tunnel. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris.
Really happy to have you on. I mean, just that bio, the way it reads.
This is my second podcast, and there was also kind of like an introduction like that. And it's really funny to hear that on the other side, right? It's not something I think about every day. And when you list that off, it really... it kind of hits you a little bit like, well.
I hear you. I mean, some of the guests and what they've said prior to coming on and post interviews is kind of an experience of reflecting on their careers and what they've done. And yeah, I'd imagine so as well. Kind of puts everything in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. It for sure does. And especially, I mean, I can talk to other athletes or skydivers about our careers, and it doesn't seem like as soon as you touch base with somebody that's kind of outside of your world, it does become a little bit more of a, reflecting thing. And
yeah. All right. Well, let's get right into it here. I'm going to go into the first segment. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And basically, this is a segment in which we try to add some zest to otherwise dry explanations of particular professions. Now, Troy, we all know, skydiving, what it is on a basic level. However, I kind of like reading off these Wikipedia definitions to allow guests to fill in the blanks of what the definition leaves out. So perhaps you could kind of give some of that added insight after listening to the Wikipedia spin on your profession. All right? Well, here goes. Skydiving. Skydiving is a method of transiting from a high point in the atmosphere to the surface of Earth with the aid of gravity, involving the control of speed during the descent using a parachute. It may involve a phase of more or less free falling, which is a period when the parachute has not yet been fully deployed and the body gradually accelerates to terminal velocity. There it is. I might add, that's the definition here, but the words body accelerating to terminal velocity hits me every time I read that. It's pretty amazing. But anyway, Troy, take it away. Is there anything that's missing from this?
No, I mean it's definitely a funny word choice. It's not like I would explain this every day exactly like that, but it's accurate. Um, I mean the cool thing about the skydive is it's really two things. You have the free fall, the terminal velocity part that you picked up on, and the parachute. It's really a sport that has two things into one. It's like you're a skateboarder, you only skateboard. Well, in skydiving, you have the free fall part, which is a thing completely in itself. There's many different disciplines and competitions that just include the free fall, has nothing to do with the parachute. And then on the other side, it's the same, like parachuting, just flying the canopy also is a really big aspect of the sport. And there's many avenues to go down just with flying the parachute, big ones, small ones, fast ones, slow ones. It's very broad in both sides. So it's a sport that combines, I would say, two sports in one.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Now that you say that, I mean, I when you see the videos of flyers like yourself, you do see them with, say, the canopy at times, or of course, as you said, I mean, just free flying. And yeah, I never really considered that, but yeah, of course. Yeah, it makes sense now. Okay. I'd be curious as well about, what this sport entails aside from like all the activities in the air. I mean, what are some of the things that you're doing, say, like pre-jump or even post-jump activities, or what's part of that whole experience, like getting ready for a jump, for example? Maybe we could start there.
We'll start with just the skydive.
Sure.
So like getting ready for a skydive for me today, it would obviously be a lot different than it would be for me when I had 5 jumps. So this whole preparation process would evolve over time, and depending on what you're doing, it will definitely change but let's just say it's a Saturday afternoon skydive. I'm going to go there to make 2 jumps and go home and have dinner just for fun. It's really quite simple. It's literally a matter of going to put money on an account that gets you a place in an airplane that you can go out and jump, and I can go and land. And it's my profession. I do it quite often. It would be like you going to hit a couple balls at the driving range for golfing. Like it can be that nonchalant for me, or it can be the exact opposite. It can be like I'm up at 6:00 in the morning and the day is already in my head, and we're coming up with a plan for the day and how many jumps we're going to do and what's going to go on for the day. So it can definitely change on a whatever basis.
Right? Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Really broad as well. Like, I mean, it can change.
Okay. Well, I guess as well, I mean, with what you're doing and being involved in competitions as well, and of course, just doing it for fun, having sponsors, travel, arranging travel, getting sponsors, as I said, managing finances, all that stuff. How about all those aspects? Where do they come into all of this too?
To be honest with you, this is the hardest part of it all.
I bet.
The flying, the showing up, the jumping, the being in shape, the being injured, all of this comes very easy to me. The part that is the most difficult is what you said, and for me it's always been more of a problem financially and organizing my time and putting all that together. It's really a thing in itself that's quite hard to manage.
Yeah, probably the hidden side of it too. We had a guest on earlier in the year, a musician, and of course, when you're thinking of what they do, of course, playing or writing, making music, but then what she was kind of saying were all these other elements, collecting the receipts and, budgeting out like your tours based on the amount of, gasoline that you can purchase to get to these shows and so on and so forth. So yeah, those hidden sides I think are quite interesting to acknowledge at least.
They're enormous. In skydiving, there's many factors that there's many moving pieces involved in skydive. Number one, good weather. Okay, so you kind of need to play that game of judging weather. Like we book training camps or jump seasons based on weather or based on this. So even it's down to the month of the year that needs to be on, right? Also the airplane. It wouldn't be the first time I showed up to a location and the plane broke after the first jump, and now we're stuck there for a week and we cannot make one skydive.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Or it's, so there's definitely a lot of move, and financially for me, it's I'm not afraid to admit, it's definitely been the hardest part, because it's not our sport is not that big yet where someone actually pays me to train. So it's not a problem finding the training time or the jumps. Well, it's the how much time I need to put into this training in order to be number one.
Yeah.
Is a lot more. And if you're not getting paid for this time, it's great to have freebies, but you still need to eat. And it's definitely that's been the one to juggle the most. And I've really ridden that line for a long time. Like it's as fast as it's gone in, it's gone out. And yeah, it's had to have been like that. If it wasn't like this, none of this would have happened. Like that's for sure. Yeah.
No, I think that kind of paints a really, clear picture or a better picture of what, your sport's all about and where you fit into it, at least at the moment. So yeah, thanks for that. All right. Well, I do want to shift into a different segment here called the Q&A Discovery. I'm just going to fire off some questions at you. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. So the first one here is a personal one. I'd be curious about what attracted you to both skydiving and or even tunnel flying. Maybe even, this would be a good point to bringing tunnel flying into discussion. Maybe you could explain a little bit about that as well, in your answer.
Yeah, well, the tunnel flying only exists because of the skydiving. So first and foremost, the only reason I ever flew in a wind tunnel was because I was a skydiver.
Yeah. So really quickly, what is tunnel flying? Because there's probably a bunch of people out here who don't necessarily know what it is or what.
Yeah. So a wind tunnel is basically the only way you can practice what you would do in a skydive. Obviously, you cannot fly the parachute. That doesn't work. So the closest thing to practicing this would be a simulated free fall machine. And they've been around for a long time. There's actually one in Niagara Falls, close to where we live. I've been to before, but they're on a level now today where it's exactly like jumping from an airplane.
Really?
I mean, I would say even better now. It's become a thing completely different than that. The machines have got so big, and the thing has become a whole other sport and a whole other thing that is it's a different sport now. But everything you learn in there is transferable to skydiving.
Okay.
And you win so much time with this. Just basic way to break it down is basically we can say one skydive, you'll have around 60 seconds to 45 seconds of free fall time on average, let's say. Okay. And let's say if you do 8 jumps in a day on an average, that's a huge day for you. You're tired the next day, probably won't even jump the next day if you're not in shape. That's a huge day. So you can clock not even 10 minutes of, let's say 8 minutes of free fall time or something like this, 7 minutes of free fall time in a day, where in a wind tunnel, I can fly 2 hours a day. No problem.
So it just accelerates the development training.
100%, tenfold.
Yeah.
And so back to your original question, so I was a skydiver, and I had taken a trip to Arizona in America, and they actually had a wind tunnel on the drop zone.
Okay.
And I went there after the first 30 seconds I walked in there, I basically knew okay, this is the way.
Yeah.
The stuff I was seeing the guys doing in there, and wow, it was just, yeah, it was the only way. It was basically the only way until I seen the price of it and how much it costs. And it was whoa, well, everything you just thought, let's step back a little bit, right?
Right.
Super pricey. I mean, for that accelerated progression that you get, there's a price for it too.
Of course, yeah.
So the basic price in Europe right now per hour is 500 euros.
Wow.
It's 500 euros per hour of training time.
Wow. Yeah, that puts things into perspective real fast.
Puts something into perspective of this financial battle that can occur,
No doubt. Okay.
Yeah.
What keeps your attraction to the sport as a whole, whether it's, pure skydiving or in the tunnel at the moment?
At the moment, that thing is starting to kind of shift for me as well. I mean, it's been 10 years that I've been in the sport. And I think it's only been in the last year or two that I've kind of feel this peak almost of I don't know how to explain it, of not learning, but this peak of okay, maybe it's time to go in another direction, maybe in the sport, instead of just on that same path, going for the the same goal, which I think is a good thing, because it's definitely like I've kind of looked away maybe into other disciplines and other sports within skydiving now that are kind of getting me excited, because for me, I'm a specialist in free fall.
Okay. And that's been your goal, like up until this, you just referenced like
It was never the goal. It just happened like that. It just happened like that. Like, I took a job in a wind tunnel in order to become a better skydiver, which, and like basically just painted a picture and a path for itself. Like, I never had any really plans to be involved with the wind tunnel that much. This was my way into skydiving. This was going to be my thing that was going to make me much better, that I don't need the money in order to do it. So my thing was to try to find that way in, to get the skills up higher, that I could start to make a living, or I could start to be fully inside of it without paying for it. Right. That was the goal pretty early on. And the wind tunnel was just the easiest route to get there.
All right. Well, it sounds as though you're reaching that point of, maybe shifting off into a different direction. And that might be an interesting thing to follow up on later in our talk. But I do have another question here for you right now. In terms of, the role of, say, fear and adrenaline, almost like a yin yang, sort of like complementary forces here. And I'd be curious to hear like what those elements, fear and adrenaline, play for you personally within this extreme sport.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, this is one this is the question, or the thing that gets brought up the most to me with non-skydivers, or someone who doesn't really has an extreme sport. To be completely honest with you, in today, it doesn't really do much for me. But I feel like the risk of jumping from an airplane, and it's a skydive, of course, it's more dangerous than going for a bike ride. It definitely puts the mind in this focus place, where this I cannot really explain. I mean, it's only something I've ever got from skydiving or base jumping or something on a more higher level. It's the focus that comes in. This is what I like. It's the clarity. It's the focus. I wouldn't really want to do something if I'm scared of it, if that makes sense. I don't really have that. I'm like, again, I'm a professional. I do this a lot. Like, I'm not really afraid to jump in the water, like it's.
Yeah. I was curious whether or not like there'd be, I don't know, maybe like, as you just acknowledged, like being a professional and also someone who's always trying to, I assume like push yourself in the boundaries of what's possible, what's not possible. There's always got to be that line to a certain extent. You're like, well, I know, like I've been flying this long. I know I can do this, but could I maybe do this other thing as well? I mean, it could go the wrong way, but I might be able to pull it off. Like, I mean, there must be, I don't know, maybe there isn't, but an element of kind of not fear necessarily, but maybe apprehension, or like, well, should I do it? But then you get that adrenaline burst, like, no, I'm going to do this.
I have to say, I've been extremely lucky in my career as far as major injuries. I've been hurt a lot. I've broken several bones. I wouldn't call this major injuries compared to some of the injuries that my friends and people I know well have, let's knock on wood on this, that I know have gotten into some troubles, like proper surgeries, like, breaking backs and things like this, where they're really injured and it takes a lot to get back. And I actually had my first injury ever about a year and a half ago, to the point where I couldn't walk for 4 months. I couldn't train or fly for 6 months almost.
I'd say that's major. That would qualify.
Yeah. Like, and this is the first time where I've had this fear and this thing now. It's the first time ever in my life where I actually had in this little guy in the back of my head that's like, hey, you remember that? Like, do you want to do this again?
Right.
It's yeah, it goes away quick though.
Yeah, it's a visceral sort of experience, I'd imagine. Like, in any professional in any sport who goes through that probably has those moments afterwards. I mean, it's almost a bit of like human, I don't know, just life and living of going through experiences is like that.
But always like the drive outweighed the consequences for most of my career. And I was never really fearful. Like, in the wind tunnel too, it's an enclosed space, right? It's not the open air. So I actually got way more injured in the wind tunnel in my career than I ever did in skydiving.
That's fascinating. That's
Yeah,
really
like,
interesting.
yeah, I've only ever had one trip to the hospital in 3,000 skydives. I've had several trips to the hospital from the wind tunnel.
The wind tunnel. Wow.
Yeah, and I think this is just because you're in a closed space.
Right. Yeah, that would make sense then. Okay. I've got another question here for you, and it's kind of continuing on this track of your evolution as a flyer, whether it's in the tunnels or, in the air. Yeah, I've read that as a mature flyer nowadays, your style would be characterized as flying with finesse. Like for somebody who's outside of the sport, I'd be curious to know what that means.
So flying is something that it's really hard to relate to other sports. I've played a lot of sports in my life. Done a lot of extreme sports. I've really took an interest into many different things, and flying is the one thing that is just completely different than all of them. You have a 3D playing field. It's not like when you surf a wave that you're floating on top of the water, and let's say you can go left, right, and up or down. I mean, you cannot go up or down, but you can basically go left or right, and that's it. As you're constantly moving forward, right? You only have this one type of energy to play with. Well, the way that we fly today, you literally have a 3D playing field. So if I want to do a loop like this, I can do a loop like this. If I want to do a banking turn like a jet fighter plane, I can do a banking turn like a jet fighter plane. I can. It's a 3D type of playing field, and I think where the finesse thing would come from is how minuscule changes in your body can have the biggest impact in your flying. Like it definitely becomes into something where like strength is not the number one thing you want. It's how well you know your body, balance, also strength. When all this stuff comes together with a brain, then you can see the difference between someone who has finesse in flying and someone who
somebody without finesse would be somebody who's a little bit more reckless, who's just kind of like
more reckless. I mean, he could have the same power as me, but we're going to look completely different. Like we might be going the same place at the same time at the same speed, and there's gonna be a thing that it will look nicer with someone who has finesse, if that makes sense to you. And in our sport, we're judged on that. We're judged on basically what we look like, right, and what we're doing. So the nicer you would look and more finesse you would have, someone who has the eye for flying is going to see this pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good segue into this next question here in terms of competitive flying. What is that all about? You just kind of alluded to it, in terms of you judged on your body control and movements.
So I've only ever done high-level competitions in the wind tunnel. I've yet to do an actual skydiving competition, and this is on the plate. This will for sure happen in my career. It just hasn't. We'll get into that. That's another thing. But so the wind tunnel competitions, there's several different disciplines. Like, so for example, I'll just name a couple. You have freestyle, and it's a mix of men and women together. And this, you're alone in the wind tunnel, and you basically come up with a routine that you want to present to the judges that would show finesse, that would show athletic ability, that would show many different things that you would want to present to the judges, and you were scored on this. You also have...
So sorry, you'd have two of you in the wind tunnel at the same time, or just...
Freestyle would just be one person. So this is a single person event.
Okay.
And then you have a two-way dynamic, which was my discipline. So we have a partner. So there's two of us in the wind tunnel the whole time. We also needed to create a routine that we would show to judges.
Yeah.
And there was also speed rounds, this is called. So we're basically in a race. So me and my teammate, we're in a race against other teams.
Okay.
And so basically how this works is the wind tunnel gets divided up into four corners with lights, and it's a really not spectator-friendly sport. You have to be really into it in order to understand, if that makes sense to you. So basically, we're in a race against other teams.
Okay. To score as many points.
No, to just be the fastest. It's literally like a car race, or we're basically on a racetrack, and we're trying to get around this track as fast as possible.
Okay, so there's different points within the tunnel that you have to get to.
Yeah, so Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
So there would be, the judges would tell us what line we're flying. We know the lines usually by heart.
Yeah.
And me and my teammate need to go in there and fly it faster than the other teams.
Okay.
Without making mistakes. If you make mistakes, they add time to your score. So you have to be really precise and accurate, and you have to be fast.
Well, that's where the finesse, I guess, comes into it all, right? I mean,
where the finesse comes into it again, definitely plays a big, and the mental side is for me, I think, the most like underrated part of what we do, because when you're moving like that, you're going up and down and side to side and around this wind tunnel. Like what your eyes see and your mind is, you cannot replicate. Like maybe a jet fighter pilot can.
Right. It's just happening so fast, everything around you. And as you said, you're in that 3D space trying to control your body, trying to control your mind, all at the same time with an objective in mind. It must be
thinking ahead. Like once we're in these speed rounds, you have 3 pages to do. So that means you have to do this line 3 times. You have to count that in your head. You can get lost. I mean, it's like being focused and on for this minute or however long is can be long minutes.
Wow, that's so interesting. No, I think you're painting a really, really interesting picture of what this sport is all about.
I would like to get back to it, and that's why I believe our sport hasn't quite made it to a point where it will be on TV or it will be in the Olympics yet, because it's just so hard to understand from the outside. Like I have friends and family who have watched me fly and they'll watch and support and this and that, but they have no idea what's going on. Unless
how would you really, Yeah,
how would you? Like unless you're at the competition, listening to the commentator and having an understanding of like what line we're flying, so what we have to do so that you would recognize when we make a mistake, then it would get interesting, and then you would feel the nerves and the buzz like you would in any sport.
Right. I guess that's kind of maybe the evolution of the sport and where it's going, is that's what's needed perhaps next. I mean, it sounds as though like the competitions are there and the parameters for those within the industry, like yourself, are all known. Now it's maybe taking it to that next level of starting to put it out into like the perception of, the just general public and whatnot. So, I mean, it seems to be, extreme sports as a whole seem to be on that track of, gaining a lot of traction, and this could be the next one.
It will get there. One day it will get there. I think the technology we're still in this tech bubble. I think they've just built a wind tunnel in Abu Dhabi that's 32 feet in diameter. So to put that in perspective, that's like 75% bigger than the ones we usually fly in.
Oh, wow.
So this already is something that
game changer.
Yeah. This is a game changer. I mean, it's literally 4 or 5 times bigger than what we're usually flying in. It's like this could also change something for spectator.
Really interesting stuff here, Troy. I do want to shift over into a new segment here. This one here is called Water Cooler Story. And basically, I just ask guests to indulge the listeners with a story, relating to the profession. It could be for you, for example, something in the air, or it could be on the ground, and some of the things that are part of your experience of being a professional flyer. So yeah, whatever you got, I'd love to hear it.
It seems so far away when you're an early skydiver. Like when I first started jumping, and I remember having 20 skydives. 20 skydives today is literally 10 years ago, right? So I used to pack parachutes and to make more money on the side just so I could jump more. And I went on the road to this event where they were trying to break some record in Canada, and they just said, if you come for this couple days, you're going to make a lot of money packing parachutes. It's like, okay, cool. I'll go. I go this. And then they end up having some of the best free flyers in the world were there at that time. So I met some of the who's who of like the guys I'm watching on YouTube. Like, whoa, it would be like if you met Michael Jordan, you're a basketball player, a little bit kind of thing for me, And at that time it was the biggest thing ever. And talking to these guys, they have thousands of jumps, and I got to understand a little bit like, okay, that's where they're at now. It really painted this picture of like, whoa, how far you have to go. I have 20 skydives. I'm talking to guys that have 5,000. This is years and years and years ahead. The other day, I had a funny conversation because these same guys I work with now. I hang out with these guys. It's like this change from being the nobody to like being exactly where I wanted to be happened so fast and so like this. And yeah, I think this story of being like it, you know, for someone trying to make it and whatever, it's as far as it may seem, it's so close. You just gotta stick to it and hold on. And man, at the time I didn't even realize that I was working with these guys and hanging out with these guys when 5 years ago it was my dream. You know what I mean? I couldn't imagine how fast it can pick up if you make the right moves and
the dedication, I guess, as well, of sacrifice and things that we, you know, I kind of introduce you in what you've done. I mean, maybe even right now, and I'd really quickly like just touch on that point of learning a language. You know, what was that all about basically, and why was that necessary? Maybe if you could really quickly just kind of tell that a little bit.
Yeah, really quickly. So I got this job offer in Montreal. And as you know, in Quebec, they speak French, obviously. And it's in the law in Quebec that you speak the language in order to work there.
Okay.
So like legally, you cannot work there without speaking the French language. So the guys there gave me the job, but they said, "Hey man, you can't speak French. Like you can't work here." And this threw a big monkey wrench in the plans, and I ended up really not getting the job. And then I said, "I'm going to move there anyways, and I'm going to enroll in school, and you're going to hire me back," kind of attitude. And they ended up helping me out with school and supporting me in it once they saw it was that serious. And man, after my first day of French school, I came home and I cried. I came home and I cried and was like, man, I just jumped in the deep end of something that is not going to happen. I literally told somebody at that time, like, this is impossible. I'm going to forget that and move on, because this is just, you know, like ridiculously hard. And I have to say that's the one thing I'm the most proud of myself today, is that I really stuck to it. And wow, it's powerful to learn another language. And
yeah, well, I think it's representative of, you know, your whole trajectory and everything you've done. I mean, it's through this lens of, you know, dedication and, you know, perseverance, and like that's clearly one of the biggest examples, I think, of that. I mean, it's quite amazing.
So I took this French school on, and I took this French, starting to learn to speak French, this journey. I couldn't work. They wouldn't let me work with the customers. So this is where the janitor job came in. They said, if you want to keep making money here, we can give you a job. It will be a janitor. I'm a trained instructor, man. I'm one of the best flyers there, and I'm cleaning the toilets. I'm changing the toilet. It was horrible. Like listening to French stuff in my ears all the time. Like, I mean, yeah, it was, and this went on for a good 5-6 months, at least. And the manager just kept testing my level, and until I could say a full class in French and ask and answer a few questions without sounding too bad, she wouldn't let me do it. And yeah, but that opened doors for me. You know, that also sticking to it also opened doors for me. I always kind of felt like I wasn't smart in school and stuff like this. I mean, we're Canadian. We took French in school, and I was not good at it. Like I didn't like it. It didn't come to me.
Well, there's no relevance, probably.
Right. Like where we come from, nobody speaks French, like except your mom.
Yes, my mother being a French teacher. Yeah.
But yeah, like honestly, and now my girlfriend here, she's a francophone. She speaks French. We speak French every day. French is a huge part of my life now. I mean, I've got jobs and many opportunities just because of this. And it's another thing that just opens that CV and that resume. If you're someone that's in a niche market or in this, I mean, just adding a language to your resume, but it goes so far for you.
Certainly. Well, yeah, and I think it just sort of like colors the picture, in terms of like what you have done to reach the pinnacles of your sports and how it's allowed you to, like you said, open up all these different doors. So, you know, hats off to you for sure on that.
In the time, I didn't really feel like that. It was kind of just felt like one of these roadblocks that I had to get through. And I didn't even think about that really at the time. You know, it was just like another thing in the way, and you got to go through it. And we'll get on to the next one, you know?
Well, I mean, the way it plays out, to be honest, I mean, you have all the elements of a nice inspirational sport movie. I think you've got it, you know, from the ground up right on through to where you're at right now. So I think, yeah, maybe one of these days, hopefully a listener, somebody within the industry might be a fun sort of take on this, exploring the sport and your personal rise within it. I do want to shift over into our last segment here, and we're going to look to the future here. It's called the crystal ball segment. Normally we're looking at trends, predictions in the industry, but you kind of spoke to this earlier in our talk about you've been on one path for so long now, but you've kind of reached this point after 10 years of kind of like looking at different areas to possibly explore moving forward. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, if you could share.
Yeah, so I mean, I will always be a skydiver. It will be something that I do forever. But like we briefly talked about earlier, the sport is so big. It's so broad. I mean, now the explosion of wingsuit flying now, if you know what that is, I'm pretty sure most of the listeners would know more about wingsuit flying than my discipline. For example, like wingsuit flying is for sure something I see becoming much bigger in the future. The technology, the suits are becoming better.
Mm-hmm. Would that be referring to like what people are using when they're doing like base jumping?
Yeah, exactly. So like all of those guys who base jump, they're jumping from the airplanes too.
Okay.
I mean, that's where they learn most of their stuff. I mean, taking it through the mountains is something afterwards. And wingsuit skydiving has also come a long way, and it's becoming really cool. And yeah, it's really blowing up, and you're almost getting double the amount of flight time if you put a wingsuit on than if you don't.
Yeah, I guess
so you know, kind of gas prices, fuel prices are going up. Skydiving has typically, the pattern is becoming more expensive every year in a way. It's looking like it's making more sense to put on a wingsuit. Yeah,
maximize the time and the value essentially.
Yeah. That's one thing. Also, another thing is technology. I mean, the more technology comes out, the more it helps our sport. I feel like in the future, if there could be ways that we could get to altitude without using an airplane, faster, more efficient, cheaper, then the sport really blows up, because I feel like that's the main thing that's holding us back, is the fact that you need Transport Canada, and in order to run your business, like there's so many hoops to jump through with these aircrafts today that for me is the thing that holds skydiving back.
The regulation, essentially.
The regulations, the this, the that, like it really becomes something to juggle. No.
Yeah.
Where if you just have some drone in your backyard that can literally take you to the altitude and charges by battery, which this is where I think it's going to be going in the next 5 to 10 years. This will change the game big time.
Wow, it's something obviously, I mean, being an outsider of that sport, something I'd never considered, and I just had a mental image of that. But I mean, as crazy as that sounds, we're probably, you're right, we're not that far off from any of that. I mean, are those types of things that you've heard about, like whispers in the industry, or those are things that are just kind of like still a bit of like pipe dreams that flyers like you're like, oh, it'd be awesome if this was available? Or
no, just through some of the guys I've met and have seen on stuff, like I truly believe that will happen in my career.
Wow.
Yeah, like they've already put electric engines into caravans and planes that we jump from. They've made a few electric ones now, which is starting cool. But I just think there's more efficient way to fly than the aircraft.
Right.
And this will happen. And this changes everything too. I mean, I've been fortunate enough, done some skydiving in the last couple of years from helicopters with only a few guys in the helicopter. We're only 2 or 3 of us in the helicopter, and we have the sky to ourselves. It's a different thing. It's so much more free. We can tell the helicopter to go wherever we want and just get out there and let's go chase that cloud and
hold in this position for a little while.
Yeah, if you could be a little bit more versatile and a little bit more free with the flying part, it can open up skydiving big.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Troy. I think you've shared so much, I think, with listeners today that they're just going to have that much more of a better understanding. I know I certainly do. I mean, I thought going into this, like I follow, some extreme sports from time to time, and not doing them personally, but, involved in other sports most of my life, and, knowing and understanding some of the elements and like the mental side of it as well. But what you shared, I think today just took it to a whole different level, which is really reflective of you and what you've done in your career. So yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed having you on the show today.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
We're going to draw this to a close. But for those interested in learning more about Troy and his work, you can find him on YouTube under the search terms Troy Rodway. You can also find and connect with him through Instagram. And if you missed it, this information will be included in the show notes. So if you like today's show, be sure to tell a friend and share. Also, to show support, you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. And don't forget to join us for the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm Christopher Schoenwald, your host, and until next time, stay curious about life and living.